Welcome to our second charter chat for the year. I'm Nicola Fairley. I'm the director of the Charter Schools Department at the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And next slide, please. Before we get started with some introductions and looking at the agenda, I just wanted to share with you all a couple of reminders about Zoom etiquette. We'd like you to please keep yourself muted. And put your questions into the chat. There will be a Q&A at the end, so you can either put questions into the chat or wait until the end. Additionally, this session is recorded, as you just heard. However, the only recording will be in the main room. The breakout rooms will not be recorded. And speaking of breakout rooms, we will have a breakout room session today. So we'd like you to rename yourself now. I'm not a good example because I haven't done this, but if you are a non-authorizer partner, put a P in front of your name. In fact, you can look at Michelle Johnson, and she has done exactly what we would like you to do. If you consider yourself to be from the northern region of California, put an N in front of your name. If you are from the central region, put a C in front of your name. And if you're from the southern region, put an S in front of your name. So hopefully that helps and you can get that done before we get to our breakout regions. So today we're going to cover 2 legislative updates, several hot topics related to program and fiscal oversight. And then, as I indicated earlier, we will do breakout by regional affiliation. Next slide, and then we'll have a Q&A. Next slide, please. So as I already mentioned, I'm Nicola Fairley. I'm the director of the Charter Schools Department at the Santa Clara County Office of Education. My colleagues here are Dr. Michelle Johnson, who is the associate director, Dr. Julia Geary, who is the administrator, Shalu Sharma, and Cynthia Tapia are both fiscal administrators. Next slide, please. Our partners at the California Charter Authorizing Professionals, or CCAP, are Tom Hutton, Executive Director, Dr. David Patterson, who is the board president of CCAP, and I'm not sure if Debbie Deal is here or not, but Debbie Deal is currently the treasurer and also works with us on this grant. Also joining us is our CDE partner, and today CDE is represented by Allison Ball. Allison, can you give a wave? Thank you. And we are going to just jump right on into our CASI recap. Michelle.
So CASI's been very busy lately, and we held our first charter chat in March. We're still collecting information on our annual survey, which if you haven't filled out, please do. And Amy just dropped the link in the chat. We held our first regional HUD meetings this month, taking a deeper look at the CCAP annual report toolkit, which provides feedback to charter schools in the areas of academics, governance, and fiscal, with an eye looking towards renewal. And we also presented at the Small School Districts Association on Authorizing and Oversight 101. So we've had a very busy last couple of months. And next slide, please.
So Tom, could you?
Yeah, and this is me. Michelle mentioned that we had our first regional trainings, which we're doing quarterly. And we just wanted to give a particular shout out to the hosts in our partner county offices of education who convened those for us. That was Joe Hendricks in Sutter County, Corey Loomis in Riverside, and Neil McChesney in Contra Costa. And as we've mentioned in past meetings, if you've heard, we are always looking for more county office of education partners to sort of help regionalize this effort and bring it closer to home, which is one of the lessons that we've learned in trying to engage very, very busy authorizers, particularly the small and rural authorizers that are a focus of this effort. And on that note, we wanted to heartily welcome, when we made that announcement in our last charter chat, Kathy Morris from Kern County jumped right in the chat and said, hey, we'd be interested in talking about that. And all the alarm bells went off on all of the CASI folks, like, yay, we got one. And so So Kathy, welcome and thank you for stepping forward. And thankfully, also in this last month, we also reached out to Michelle Archuleta in Monterey County, and she also has gotten her county signed on as a new partner for us as we move this effort forward.
Next slide, please. So at our last charter chat, we did an activity in the breakout room, which involved you all adding questions to a Jamboard. And so we just wanted to answer some of those questions. We've captured them all, but we're just going to take a few for today. And we do intend to actually go through all of them as we go along. So I'll start with the first question. When should we start focusing on renewals? So the answer to that is now, although AB 130 provided a 2-year extension to all the charter terms, which terminates, that there was an extension to all the charter terms that terminate between January 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2025, because there was insufficient academic performance data. Now is the time to visit schools and see how they are meeting the needs of their students. Now is the time to talk to the educational partners of those schools to see if the charter school is fulfilling the promises made in their charter. You should use this time to do annual visits and write annual reports to provide feedback to the charter school, again, with the eye toward renewal. The findings at renewal should not be a surprise. So you should be working now to find out how the school is doing to support your renewal decision. And I'll turn the next question over to Dave.
Okay, the next question that came in was about credentials and what credentials are required for charter school staff. And Education Code 47605L was updated as part of some of the recent changes. And now charter school teachers are required to have the same teaching credentials as those in a traditional district school. Charter school administrators are not required by law to have credentials, but you also need to be, careful to double check that what the charter petition might say and what MOUs might also have to say. The requirement for teaching credentials being the same as for traditional public schools does have a phase-in period for those that were employed at the time. And if you want to get the specific information about the period of time for that and additional requirements, the Charter School Division website includes updates from the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. And we have an opportunity, I think we have the link that we'll be sharing with you for that. So you can take a look there if you need some more specific. The piece I would add is that the good news is that most county offices have a great deal of expertise on credentialing and are often a great source of resources.
Tom, could you take the next question?
Okay, well, this one, the question came in, and as those of you who participated in our regional meetings know, that was the focus of the regional meetings we just had, the trainings, was to talk about annual reports and to offer up a toolkit on how to get started on that if it's not something in your practice. Just as we should note, annual reports are not a requirement of the California Charter Schools law, but that said, it is a best practice that we strongly encourage, particularly as you look ahead to renewal, to have that annual formalized check-in on how things are looking. That's a useful check-in point, not only for your own board and your staff and the school staff, but for the school's own governing board to sort of see how things are going. We went through the CCAP toolkit on annual reports, which was developed with the collaboration of authorizers from around the state, and it's intended to be customizable locally to focus on things you want to look at in the academic area, in the financial area, in the operational and governance area, and also some reflection not scored on sort of public policy purposes, because that's a theme that's now been encouraged in the law in other contexts, and we think it's a useful discussion point for schools and authorizers. Those resources, we also talked about site visits, and Santa Clara County shared some tools that they have for doing the site visits as part of that preparing the annual report process. Those tools that we shared will be added to the CASI website. It takes a little bit of time to get through the pipeline sometimes for CDE webmaster sorts of things, but stay tuned, it'll be there. I think it's in the chat if you're looking for help with that too. And again, this is, while it's not something required, we are trying to make it easier for smaller authorizers who haven't been doing this to get started on doing that and making that a practice.
Thank you. Michelle, how should the authorizer handle parent complaints regarding the charter school?
So this is actually a really good question. In the charter petition, a proposed dispute resolution section is included. And as charter schools cannot bind the authorizer as to what is written in the charter, it's usually only a suggestion. Therefore, you use the memorandum of understanding, or the MOU, between the authorizer and the charter school, and that will formalize how complaints are handled. The CDE has also provided the following charter school complaint form template, which a charter school may edit to include the contact information for the submission to the authorizer. And this includes the charter school complaint notice, which must be posted to the school's website, and details potential complaints under 47605. Such as discouraging a pupil from enrolling or seeking to enroll in a charter school for any other reason. It is also important for a charter authorizer to determine whether or not the complaint is related to potential material violation of the charter petition or a violation of any law, as both of these are grounds for revocation of a charter under Education Code 47607. Under Education Code 47604.4, a county superintendent of schools may, based upon written complaints by parents or other information that justifies an investigation, monitor the operation of any charter school located within the county and conduct an investigation into the operations of that charter school. And if the county superintendent of schools monitors or investigates a charter school pursuant to this action, the County Office of Education shall not incur any liability beyond the cost of the investigation. And so finally, as a best practice for SCCOE, when a parent complaint occurs, we listen to the complaint, explain that we are only the authorizer and are not involved in the day-to-day operations of the school. We also provide information regarding the school's complaint process and the uniform complaint process. We notify the school of the communication or the concern and ask the school to follow up. We then keep a copy of the concern in our school's file, and depending on the severity of the issue or the failure to follow up, we may include reference to this complaint in our written annual report as part of a notice of concern or as part of the renewal process. So I know that was an awful lot of information about how you handle a complaint, but if you want more information, please contact us and we'll give you more details. Next slide.
So in this next slide, we're moving to current legislative updates. And I think Tom is taking this part.
Yeah, and these will be brief because again, at this stage in the game, we're just watching things that are in motion and we don't know where those will play out, but we want to just keep people apprised of things that are moving along because there may be implications for authorizers to be aware of. So briefly, the first bill listed here, Senate Bill 1343, that's the STRS and PERS bill for getting charter school employees into the state retirement systems. I guess big picture wise, it started out sort of saying all charter schools, and when you come up for renewal, we want you to move over. That was pretty operationally problematic for people in one system and schools having to sort of figure out, well, these employees are going there and those employees are going there. And so that has been changed, but there still is legislation in motion. The general premise being, we got to shore up to make sure there's enough active employees in the system relative to the retired employees. So stay tuned on that. The next bill, 2774, is a change, and this one was not moving, but I understand it's been scheduled for a hearing. That one has to do with changing the UPP count to add whatever statewide is the lowest performing student subgroup with the caveat that it not already be a group that's counted for as UPP. That's the whole U in UPP is not to be duplicative in the count for the LCAP funding. But that one at least there's a hearing for it. I don't know enough about sort of its prospects, but it is moving now. And then and I guess it's not on the slide, but I'll just mention, we're coming up to the May revise of the budget, and there has been discussion there about extending to charter schools to some extent or another ADA hold harmless or some other sort of loss protection for charter schools akin to what the districts are getting with the enrollment fluctuations and declining enrollment and just the uncertainty about enrollment that we're all experiencing right now. The premise being, of course, that charters, many of them are smaller and more severely impacted by fluctuations even than some of the districts. So there's some attention to that issue in the budget discussion.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So we're going to move on to hot topics now, which really is providing you with information that is relevant to oversight of charter schools. And so next slide, please. We have 2 topics for this week, 3 topics rather. Material revisions, charter school annual information update, and student records. So Tom, can you tell us a little about material revisions?
Yeah, and again, I'll paint with broad strokes here, and my colleagues can chime in as well. This is, of course, a live and lively conversation right now. I mean, so starting just with the basics, if there is a material revision to certain very fundamental aspects of the school that was created through the approved petition, like grade level served, like locations, and a variety of other sort of very big picture aspects of the school that was approved, that's a material revision that requires the approval of the authorizers governing body to say, okay, now if you want to be a K-8 instead of a K-5 school, or you want to open another campus, we need to sort of talk about that as a change to what you originally proposed, and that's required. It's also a live wire right now because there are some provisions in recent changes to the law that affect petitions for new schools that generally are not applicable at the renewal time. But if part of the renewal process is a material change, then that aspect of it is treated a little bit like a new petition. You have to look at that. And then frankly, that is a hot topic of conversation. It's got the lawyers all looking carefully about, well, what rises to the level of material revision and what won't. Something to watch and talk about with your legal counsel. Generally speaking, the other aspect of material revisions that authorizers want to look at is what's your sort of timeline for considering them, and what do you communicate to schools about when you would like to have those brought to your attention so that you can get it through the process in time for whenever the school wants to go forward with that implementation. Michelle or others, just without making this a 15-minute conversation, other things that you think are important to flag on that one?
I would add that it's this. If you're going to, you should have. This is where communication is important. The charter should be talking with their authorizer so that if they're considering something or they had a question about it, that they should be asking that so to get the clarity, because there is some gray area. And so the last thing you want is somebody thinking it isn't a material and the authorizer says, no, we clearly think it is, or the other way around, that the charter is about to undergo a major piece of work in the district. The authorizer says, no, we don't consider that item to be such. So again, it goes back to good communication and clarity between the authorizer and the charter itself.
Thanks. I'll take the next topic on charter school annual information update, which is a little less complex than material revisions. So each year, charter schools are required to update their school and contact information on the CDE website. While this information is required of the charter school itself, as an authorizer, you may want to go and review the information to ensure that it has been updated. And then Michelle, can you take the next topic on student reports?
Sure.
records.
So I'll take the one on student records. A question actually came to CASI regarding student records for closed schools. Per the CDE website, the CDE does not have access to student records. For public schools, if a school is closed, they are to contact the local district or the county office of education. As charter schools are public schools, the question was how to access student files for closed charter schools is now based on the school's charter. Most charters upon closure will either send their files to one, the CMO or a sister school in their organization that is still in existence, or two, the school's authorizer. When files are missing, the use of the California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System, or CalPADS, then becomes necessary. So I hope that answers that question, but if you have more questions about what to do, feel free to contact us. Next slide.
So we are going to turn this over to Shalou and Cynthia to talk about Extended Learning Opportunities Program, or ELO, and this FICMAT. Cynthia, Shalou.
Thank you, Clara. So for today's hot topic for fiscal, we have Extended Learning Opportunity Program. I know there's a lot of information still, it's fluid and it's still coming up, but as of now, what we know, the Expanding Learning Opportunity Program, which provides funding for after-school and summer school enrichment program to school districts and charter school. And this funding is based on the prior year classroom-based average daily attendance for grade TK through 6, and the prior year unduplicated pupil percentage as of second principal apportionment for the prior year. The LEAs must operate the ELO-P, which is the Expanded Learning Opportunity Program, pursuant to the requirements for California Education Code 46120. For fiscal year 21-22, the statute requires LEAs to offer the ELO program to all TK through 6 classroom-based unduplicated pupils and to provide the program access. So just pay attention to offer. They have to offer to all TK through 6 grade unduplicated pupil population, but to provide access to at least 50% of the enrolled UPP for that year. And the LEAs are required to develop a program plan, and this program plan needs to be approved by the school governing board in a public meeting, and it should be posted on the school website. There are still a lot of questions and which is still building up. Please feel free to, if you have any questions, to put in a chat. We'll be happy to answer any. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Shalou. So in conjunction with Signs of Fiscal Distress document, which was discussed at the last month's charter chat, the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team, or FICMAT, created a charter school fiscal health risk analysis document. This document reviews 19 areas that are common indicators of risk or potential insolvency for charter schools. The tool provides a score based on answers provided to the questions in each of the 19 sections to determine how healthy a charter school is fiscally. The FHRA tool can be shared with the charter schools to do a self-review and or completed with the authorizer, which can assist with conversations regarding the fiscal health of the school. In a future CASI meeting, FICMAT will be presenting a more detailed walkthrough of their fiscal tools, including this one. However, on the slide, you will find a direct link to the FHRA tool. Thank you.
Thanks. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're gonna jump over to our breakout rooms. If you have not renamed yourself, please take a moment to do that right now. Again, if you are a non-authorizer, you're going to put a P in front of your name. If you consider yourself to be from the northern region of California, put an N. If you're from the central region, you're going to start with a C in front of your name. And if you're from the southern region, put an S in front of your name. Allison is going to drop into the link, into the chat, a link to a Jamboard, and you will go to the page that is related to your region and jot down any questions or anything you want to share with other colleagues, talk about annual reports, anything that you want to talk about, you can put it there. And just keep in mind that when we come out of the breakout room, we're going to be asking each team to share out a highlight from their discussion. Does anyone on the team have anything else they want to say before we go into the breakout rooms? Nope. Okay, so Allison, take us to the breakout rooms. All right, thanks everyone for taking the time to join a breakout. So now that we're back, I'm not sure, Allison, how many rooms did we have? 4? Okay. So I don't know which room I was in, but I will, since there were no volunteers, speak for our room, if I can find my notes. We talked about a bunch of stuff. We talked about school safety plans and what is the responsibility of the charter authorizer in terms of reviewing those plans and encouraging or making sure that the schools get them looked at and kind of signed off by police and fire. So we talked about that. We talked about the certificate of insurance and the fact that they need to be reviewed carefully and compared to the requirements in the MOU, if your MOU has requirements about insurance. We talked about TK expansion and whether or not that's going to require a material revision. We talked about Williams. And then a couple of questions that got put into the Jamboard included, can preschool funding be used for building a classroom that's leased, it's private land that's being leased? So that's a question that we can probably bring back to the next charter chat. And then another question was upcoming workshops mentioned at last meeting. Oh, okay, so we'll talk about upcoming workshops at the end. So room 2, can someone from room 2 report out what you all talked about?
Yeah, I'll start it off. Like your first group, we had a conversation around TK and not only the question of material revision, I'll talk about that in a sec, but also just generally like how are schools prepared? Do they have space? Do they have staff? Are they freaking out? I can't do it. Jeff Hunt from Fresno County shared a circumstance in which he has a very small charter that just doesn't feel like they have an option, and he's encouraged them to have a conversation with the local district in which they're located about making some kind of arrangement to accommodate if someone comes to their school with TK. The material revision question, you know, generally speaking, the addition of a quote unquote grade is one of the few very clearly defined definitions of material revision. This is a little different when the state has sort of come in and said thou shalt. And also, you know, Jeff pointed out that TK is kind of considered K still. So whether or not that is, and you know, Michelle Archuleta from Monterey brought up the possibility that, you know, it may be that some kind of statement from the authorizer just saying, you know, everybody agrees, talk to legal, but there may be options where you just say, you know, as the authorizer, we are saying this isn't, and this is why we say so, but talk to legal was kind of how our conversation came out. And then sort of central to kind of the idea of CASI and reaching out, especially to the authorizers who maybe need us most and have the least time to engage in these sorts of things. Jeff had a little bit of reflection in his role as a county authorizer and also support for district authorizers in the county. Maybe Jeff, we could just invite you to kind of share a little bit about what you were sharing with us.
Yeah, so there were kind of two scenarios. So one is the smaller authorizers who really, you know, I mean, if you were to evaluate their capacity to even be, you know, to oversee operations at a larger charter schools. It's like, those are, I'm finding it hard for some of the smaller authorizers to want to engage about their oversight. And I just kind of had hypotheses, you know, about reasons why they didn't really want to engage and support. And then the other was that those districts that have locally funded charters, so they run their own charters. And I have a couple here in the Fresno County area that they run their own charters, and they are really not interested in engaging in support of running their own charters. And again, and I kind of posed a couple hypotheses as to why they're not interested in support in running their own charters. And, you know, hypothesis might be ignorance is bliss, right? Like, if me as an outside person look and wonder, hey, how did you do that with a charter when, you know, this isn't supposed to be able to happen? It's like, but I don't have, you know, I don't have the jurisdiction to question, you know, how did they expand grade levels? How did they triple their enrollment when, you know, those kinds of things. And so I, you know, those are just a few hypotheses as to why they're not really interested in engaging conversations around support for their charters.
You know, just to chime in on that, it may be a really good conversation for us to have as CASI at some point. The whole sort of not statutorily defined, but de facto, you know, locally funded, dependent, whatever the label is. And some of the, you know, there are ways in which that kind of isn't really what people traditionally think of as a charter. And that may be okay. There's ways that the oversight may look different in a situation like that. And yet there are some complications for authorizers that can come upon you. If, for example, if we did a training when we were at CASBO with Jeff, his session was right before ours. And, you know, where Debbie Deal talked about, you know, what happens if something goes south with the funding and there's funding that's commingled and it becomes a big mess. So that might be a useful conversation for a future discussion at some point. And just in terms of engagement, I'd be interested if other people have thoughts about, you know, if you are one of those small authorizers, what works for you and what might be persuasive to people. But also, you know, I suggested to Jeff, you know, it may be that they are networked with other folks like the Small School Districts Association or somewhere where we can maybe try to see if there's a non-threatening way to try to see if we can be of some help. But any thoughts on that, sort of engaging the folks who aren't already on this call?
Tom, I think the value there is actually for us to think about how we can bring some of that stuff back to the chat here. I do think there's some really meaty stuff here, especially the TK issue. I would love us to do more than just talk to your authorizer. I'd love to see if we can actually have some thought about getting some guidance that is generally applicable. Those are important things.
I agree with that for sure. Can we move on to group 3, as we only have 3 minutes left? So maybe group 3 can take about 1 minute.
All right, so I was with South and we looked at dependent versus independent, talked about the parent complaint process, and is there actually a written set of procedures on how to deal with parent complaints, and reminded everyone about making sure that your board is involved, giving them periodic updates so that they stay in the loop regarding issues surrounding charters. So lots of good information.
Great. Group 4? We can't hear you.
This is a group for the non-authorizing partners, and if you look there was an issue with Williams that came up in terms of the criteria that's where there seems to be a lack of clarity or conflict between what the law says are required for teacher credentialing and what some of the requirements are under Williams to look at. And the concern is that, in fact, that just because Williams is identifying something doesn't mean you're out of compliance with the law in terms of your credentialing. And there's a desire for some clarification of that. It might be a good thing for us to talk through and have a further conversation with CASI on that. So I thought that was helpful.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone again for engaging in the breakout session. Hopefully you got some information or your question is on the Jamboard so that we can do some research and get back to you. Next slide, please. So we have a meeting survey for this meeting session that we would like you to fill out. It is now in the chat. Just take 4 questions. It'll take you 2 minutes to get that done. So hopefully you'll do that for us. Next slide. Tom? Can't hear you.
Our next charter chat, they're always on the last Wednesday at 10 a.m. We look forward to seeing you again, and we can pick up some of these conversations that we had today. Again, CCAP is we're bringing back the Authorizers conference after some years of COVID hiatus. It's going to be in Costa Mesa, June 22 and 25, and through 25. The June 22nd is a pre-conference day, and if you or you have colleagues who are relatively new to this business, the pre-conference is being offered by CASI, and it's a one-day sort of, this is an overview of what you need to know about chartering. And then if people are new to it and they want to avail themselves of the rest of the CCAP conference, which CASI also will be presenting at, that first day will equip them for the deeper dives on specific topics that you'll find in the rest of the program. So particularly for new folks or who are juggling this with 19 other things, that pre-conference with CASI, we think will be really valuable. And then we have we're teeing up the next quarterly regional meetings like we just had on annual reports. July is a tough month for a lot of people. We get that. One thing we're going to try out for this time is, instead of having 3 hybrid meetings, we're going to propose having 1 virtual meeting for those who want to attend virtually. And then the in-person meetings will be only for authorizers, and those will be sort of subject to enough interest. We understand, again, July is tough. If everybody just wants to do the virtual, we may have 0, 1, 2, or 3 regional meetings, depending on the interest of those who want to come in person. So stay tuned for those details. We're lining up the host sites and dates, and we'll like to see your signups for that.
So Tom, on the next slide, you're talking about the annual survey. But before you do that, I'd like to request that everyone who's still on the call drop their email into the chat. It'll be our sign-in sheet so we know who's here today. And also, we can get some information out to you about the CCAP conference.
Super, thank you. And just real quick, I think Mifala or Michelle mentioned this at the beginning. If you have not yet done the annual survey, it's a challenge in a state the size of California to get enough survey responses, but this is how we get a sense of CASI of where your needs are, how we can best be of help, and what are the kinds of practices that you have in your shop right now. So please take a sec to get that link in and share your thoughts with us if you haven't done so already.
All right. So I think next slide, that covers it for us for today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us and to engage around charter school authorizing and oversight. Thanks, everybody.